boys and girls. Ms Barb here again. I have another story, one of my favorites, Little Red Riding Hood. And it's written by Bonnie Dawkins. It's like a pretty girl with a cape. Oh, wonder if this is her brother. She's got a basket there. She lives in the woods. I wonder who she's going to find in the woods. Our story, Little Red Riding Hood. Let's first look at our vocab. The first word I have is treats. Treats are food or drink that someone might especially like cupcakes and strawberries and candy. Treats. The next word is rumpled. To be messy or wrinkled. It's very rumpled. This one is flung. Means to throw something. He's got the stick. He's going to throw it. He flung it. This word we had a couple weeks ago. To be scampered. The bunny scampered across the field. To run quickly. Scampered. Thumbs up. Meaning splendid. Means very good. Excellent. Splendid. And then the last word I have is bouquet. Bouquet is a bunch of flowers. Ooh, who's going to get a bunch of bouquets? Let's read our story, Little Red Riding Hood by Bonnie Dawkins. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother and brother in a small cottage by the edge of the forest. Her favorite piece of clothing was a long red cape with a soft silky hood. She wore it so often that soon everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day Little Red Riding Hood was bored and looking for something to do. "You could sweep the floor," says her mother, who was busy painting the fence. "No," says Little Red Riding Hood. "I don't think that's what I want to do." "You can help clean the yard," says her brother, who was busy chopping wood. "No," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I know that isn't what I want to do." "Then you could visit your grandmother," says her mother. "You're old enough to go by yourself, and you haven't seen her for weeks." "That's exactly what I want to do," says Little Red Riding Hood. "Grandma lives on the other side of the woods. It'll be an adventure." So Little Red Riding Hood's mother packed a basket full of treats for a girl to take to her grandmother. "Just remember," says her mother, "the woods can be very dangerous. So when you leave, please go straight to Grandma's and don't be late." "She won't listen," says her brother. "Yes, I will," says Little Red Riding Hood. "Of course she will," says her mother. "And, oh dear, something else before you go. Only talk to those you know." "She won't listen," says her brother. "Yes, I will," says Little Red Riding Hood. "Of course she will," says her mother. "And oh, one last thing, sweetheart. From the path you shouldn't stray, or you could get lost someday." "She won't listen," says her brother. "Yes, I will," says Little Red Riding Hood. "Of course she will," says her mother. "Goodbye, dear. Give your grandma a big hug for me." "Yes, mother," says Little Red Riding Hood. Then she leaped out of the door, down the path, and into the forest. There was so much to see in the woods: a sleeping owl, a giant mushroom, an amazing spider web. Little Red Riding Hood remembered what her mother had said. "When you leave, please go straight to Grandma's, and don't be late." "But," thought Little Red Riding Hood, "Mother would surely want me to enjoy the forest." So she stopped and looked around. Just then, a dark shape stepped out from behind one of the trees. It was a wolf, and it was smiling a charming smile. "Why, hello, little girl," says the wolf. "Isn't this a lovely day?" Little Riding Hood remembered what her mother had said. "Something else before you go. Only talk to those you know." "But," thought Little Red Riding Hood, "he seems like such a friendly wolf. Mother surely won't want me to be rude." Hello, Mr. Wolf, says Little Red Riding Hood. Yes, it's a lovely day. And you seem to be such a delicious, by which I mean a delightful child. The wolf's smile grew even bigger. What might your name be? Everyone calls me Little Red Riding Hood, says the girl. A splendid name, says the wolf. And where might you be headed, Little Red, if I may call you? You may, said Little Red Riding Hood. I'm bringing Grandma this basket of treats. She lives on the other side of the forest. How kind of you, the wolf said. In fact, wouldn't your grandma like a lovely bouquet of wildflowers as well? There are some just over that hill down by the edge of the river. Red Riding Hood remembered what Mother had said. From the path you shouldn't stray, or you could get lost some day. But, thought Little Red Riding Hood, Mother surely would want me to bring Grandma some flowers. That's a wonderful idea, Mr. Wolf. I'll pick some right away. And she scampered off into the woods. Goodbye, Little Red, says the wolf after her. I'm sure we'll meet again very soon. And then he whispered, by which I mean for lunch. The moment Little Red Riding Hood disappeared, the wolf dashed down the path toward the grandmother's cottage. He tapped lightly on the door. Grandmother, he said in his best little girl's voice. It's me, Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red, really? How wonderful! Grandma flung open the door. Wait, she said, you're not Little Red Riding Hood. Sadly, no, says the wolf, by which I mean goodbye. And he swallowed the grandmother in one big gulp. And now the wolf patted his stomach. I'll wait for dessert. There it is. Sometime later, Little Red Riding Hood came out of the woods. She was dirtied and rumpled, and there were burrs in her hair. It was much harder to find the path again than I thought it would be, she said. She was surprised to find her grandmother's door wide open. She stepped inside. Grandma, are you home? Yes, dear, came from a scratchy voice from the bedroom. But I'm in bed. I'm afraid I have a nasty cold. Little Red Riding Hood followed the voice into the bedroom. The curtains were closed and it was very dark. Grandmother was wearing a floppy nightcap and the blankets were pulled up past her nose. Red Riding Hood moved toward the bed. Grandma's eyes looked very odd. Why, Grandma, she said, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with, my dear. Come closer. I can give you a hug. Red Riding Hood took another step and saw two odd triangles poking up under the nightcap. And Grandma, what big ears you have. The better to hear you with, my dear. Can you come a bit closer still? Just then the blanket slipped from the grandmother's face, revealing two rows of very sharp teeth. But Grandma, said Little Red Riding Hood, what big teeth you have. The better to eat you, it roared the wolf, leaping out of the bed. Red Riding Hood screamed. She ran out of the bedroom, through the main room, into the kitchen, slamming doors behind her. She clambered into a cabinet, and she yanked the door shut. Oh, why didn't I listen to Mother, she thought. If I hadn't stopped in the woods, I wouldn't have met the wolf. If I hadn't talked to the wolf, I wouldn't have left the path. If I hadn't left the path, I wouldn't have been late to Grandmother's. Then none of this would have happened. In the kitchen, she could hear the wolf calling her name. Where are you, Little Red? He says. There's no need to hide. By which I mean, I'm going to find you and eat you no matter what. Just then, something crashed. A voice yelled. Dishes smashed. The sound got louder and louder and wilder and wilder, and then everything went quiet. Little Red Riding Hood peeked out from the cabinet. There stood her brother, his axe in one hand. He was helping Grandma step out of the wolf. Thank you, dear, says Grandma. It was very dark in there. The brother looked at Little Red Riding Hood. I knew you wouldn't listen. Little Red Riding Hood scrambled out of the cabinet, gave her brother a big hug. You were right, she says. but I will from now on." Then Little Red Riding Hood, her brother, and their grandma all sat down together to eat the treats from the basket. That is our story of the week called Little Red Riding Hood. Thanks for listening.